Well, I mean, it's also like everywhere in the Bible. Oh, everywhere in the Bible? Well, I mean, the word disciple was only used twice in the Old Testament, and I mean, only in the 4 Gospels, and only a little bit in Acts. But I mean, you can totally read it in the text. I mean, yeah, you could make an argument that elements of this radical definition are here and there, like for specific purposes or jobs, but to say that any one person adopted another person's entire way of life in this radical way, let alone say that it's in all of Scripture, just seems like a stretch. Okay, well, like Paul totally did this. So while Paul was persecuting Christians, he would have had disciples. Oh, and Paul is the only person Scripture says had his own disciples after Jesus' death. And that was only for one verse in the book of Acts. I'm listening. Well, they're actually mentioned in Acts 9:25, right after his conversion when he went back to a place that he was familiar with. They actually helped him escape and leave them. We never hear about them ever again, and any mention of disciples outside of this specific one in the entire book of Acts 100% shows their possessiveness to Jesus alone and no other. Even the ones who were baptized under John were still considered Jesus's alone. Well, yeah, but like Timothy and Barnabas and stuff, they were definitely disciples of each other and stuff, but of Jesus alone and not each other. The word's not even used. Oh, you see, Paul had disciples at one point, so he knew the word and what disciples were. So wouldn't he have used that word in one of his letters in referring to those people if that's what they were to him? The Spirit had him use other words for a reason. Yeah, but Paul says to follow and imitate him, and that automatically means that he wanted to reinstate an overly rigid, lifelong, radical definition above Scripture's meaning to all Christians based on the same man-made tradition that Paul himself seems to correct throughout almost all the rest of his letters. Oh, well, if you don't get it, it's probably because it's a sod. Okay. Hey everybody, what you just saw was a conversation that current me wished I had with the younger version of me. See, I'm all for discipleship. I think it's an important part of the growth of a believer. I think it's a healthy part of a functioning church. The problem is that definition of discipleship. See, I was told that in the same radical way that people left everything and followed Jesus to imitate his way of life, we're supposed to do that same. We're supposed to pick a more mature Christian and leave everything and follow them and try to imitate them in basically a very similar radical way, and that there were no other acceptable methods because that's the only one that Jesus said, because it's all through Scripture. Well, I went through Scripture and I did not see that. Now granted, you could find certain elements of this process here and there for specific reasons or tasks or seasons, as I think it might even be good for us, sometimes a person maybe to do it for a season, etc. But the claim was made to me that it's all through Scripture, and after doing my own research, I found that it wasn't. Not in its entirety, not to its extremes, not really to any individual, and especially not all throughout. And if you'd like to read more about this or any of the topics connected to it, send me a message. I'd love to give you some content. I even have a 30-page super detailed review I'd be happy to give you. Anyway, grace and peace. Blessings.
What would you say to a church who is implementing first-century discipleship methods, saying every Christian must have their own disciples who follow them around, live together, work together, etc.? Okay, Joshua, I think what that's doing is that's misunderstanding something. It was practiced by Jesus and his disciples, okay, which is fine. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. It's possible to see how it could be easily abused, how it can easily turn into something that is excessive authority and control, but not necessarily, of course.
So This would be an overly rigid application of something that may not have even fully existed in Jesus' day and trying to make it contemporary. And what you're describing is kind of an over-idealized and overly strict method that is certainly not called for.
Thank you so much.
You are very welcome, sir.